Welcome, dear friends, to Kardec Radio and the Inner Journey with Paul and Stephen. This amazing book that was psychographed by Chico Xavier in 1941 in the middle of a world war. And the subtitle says Historic Episodes of Primitive Christianity. And you remember when we shared with you that Emmanuel, the author, said in the preface, this book is not mere story. It's actually for this inner encounter with ourselves and the Christ. In the first two chapters, titled Afflicted Hearts, Tears and Torture, we saw Joshadeb the father and his two young children, not little ones, but young adults, Abigail and Jaziel, being tortured. They were taking everything they have. The quaestor, the Roman quaestor, Licinius Minucius, took everything away. And now, after the death of Joshadeb being tortured, Abigail was released, but Jaziel was sent to slavery. And this is where we find ourselves, chapter 3. You can find this book at Amazon. You can read it on Kindle format, in your book app. It's so worthwhile because we'll see how therapeutic it is for us. See, what would you do? What would you do if you find yourself in injustice? To date, we would react. We would fight, even if our lives were taken away. But Jesus said, blessed are the meek. And here we find the first Christian martyr, Jaziel. Jaziel is Jewish. He's not Christian yet. But chapter 3 says that the young Hebrew saw his father's body in grief and watched his sister in apprehension until she disappeared through the access doors to one of the prison's long hallways. He had never experienced such profound emotion. His mother's counsels flocked to his tormented mind. His mother used to assure him that one should love God above everything else. Friends, in the first 3 chapters of this book, we are going to find the main message, center stage, that to become a good person, to improve ourselves, to fulfill God's will, which is at every reincarnation, you and I are being invited for profound transformations. We need good education from the crib to when they emancipate. Jaziel's mother was instrumental. She always reminded Abigail and Jaziel. She lived it and she always reminded them, we should love God above everything else. But do we teach that to our children nowadays? No, we don't. We say, love me. I'm their mom. Your dad. No. Love God. Think about it. To love God is so profound. That's where faith comes from. We need a solid relationship with God above everything and everyone. So, question for you and I. Thermometer. Where is our love for God? How are we doing in that regard? Do we love God above everything else? Or do we love more our conveniences, our pleasures, our sensations? Question. And the story goes, as Emmanuel describes, that Jeziel had never experienced such bitter tears as those now rolling down his face in torments from his broken heart. How would he recover his courage and reorganize his life? Suddenly, he wanted to break free from his chains, approach his lifeless father, caress his white hair, while at the same time he wanted to fling open the doors, run after Abigail, embrace his sister, and never more be separated from her on the paths of life. In vain. He twisted on the punitive stake, and in retribution for his efforts, the blood only flowed more profusely from the gaping wounds. It was painful. It was difficult. Jeziel had lost the rosy color of his cheeks, the innocent tone of his loving and jovial facial expression. The cruel experience had given him a sorrowful and somber look. He had endured the bitter torture as had other descendants of his race, but he had held to his faith like the divine, a real of those who truly know how to act in hope. The author of Proverbs had recommended that serenity of the soul was crucial in all vicissitudes of human life, because from serenity issued forth the purest founts of life. Think about this serenity. In a world that is convulsing with social media, opinions, how are we serene? What do we need to do to cultivate serenity? Meditation helps. Reading books like this, very therapeutic, shows us the brain when we see these scenes, because when we're reading, we're forming pictures. Our brains are being worked out, and it's preparing pathways for us to act like the heroes of the story one day. The more we look at them, the more we will be ready to do it the same one day. We need to be watching the model. And the model here is Jeziel. And Jeziel practiced serenity his whole life. He was not an impulsive 25-year-old man. He was deeply devoted to God, deeply surrendered, and that changed not only his life, saving his life for not reacting, but brought Saul of Tarsus to Jesus, and from Saul of Tarsus to Paul of Tarsus, and the whole world got to know of Christianity. One person in serenity can change the course of events on earth. Do you doubt your mission? In the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 17, Be Perfect, in one of the items about superior and inferior, one of the superior spirits says that every person on earth has a mission, small or great. In our small tasks to be fulfilled, we are helping the collective achievement. Jeziel, in his faithfulness to God, he was sent to slavery in the galleys, the ships of the time. And in one of the conversations with other slaves, somebody was upset and said, It is rare for anyone to bear these damned oars for more than 4 months. So, usually, when people were sent to slavery in those galleys, they would never return or survive. What did Jeziel answer? He said, "But all work is God's work, my friend. And since we are here doing honest labor with a clear conscience, we should hold to the conviction of being servants of the Creator and help in His work." Think about this. Are you satisfied with your life? Are you happy with your life? Many people are not. They are feeling like enslaved by life. But we brought ourselves to this condition. Spiritism explains it to us. And Jeziel, because of his surrender, we call it calm, resignation. One day, a very influential Roman patrician came to the ship, Sergius Paulus, and got sick. The captain was asked to find the meekest of all slaves, the most dutiful. They chose Jeziel. Jeziel devotedly presented himself, saying, "My name is Jeziel, the slave who came to serve you." From that moment on, Jeziel devoted himself to the sick man with all his heart. Do we do this? Usually we don't. Usually we don't. We go to work and we don't see the good in the boss or the colleagues or the subordinates. We go home, we think everybody's inferior to us. We're bumping heads with everyone in our community. Everywhere we go, we find ourselves superior. Jeziel found himself very humble. Humble because he knew that God was above everything else. He developed a friendship with the patrician man, and the patrician man, believe it or not, healed. But, but, then Jeziel got sick. And what happened? The captain and the other people want to throw him out of the boat. Sergius Paulus said, "No, he saved my life." So he found a way to give him a bag of money and to let him be at a particular harbor in Jerusalem. He was left by the beach and went away. Jeziel was there. A man comes, steals his money, but brings him to the house of the way. Simon Peter's house in Jerusalem. What are the odds? There are no odds. Jeziel was prepared to help the Christ. Little did he know consciously in that life, but deep inside he was prepared. If you go to the book Now Solar, you are going to see that we have an opportunity to prepare ourselves for this reincarnation. Then we come here and we complain. In the book Messengers, we come to know of how many years, decades, we are preparing ourselves for this particular reincarnation, especially for us spiritists. And we drop the ball. Jeziel was between life and death, but the house of the way was helping him. After 2 weeks of exhausting state of health, Jeziel's health had improved and he was able to reharmonize his thoughts to better analyze and surmise his situation. He took kindly to Peter like an affectionate son to a true father. Noticing Peter's care and going from bed to bed, from one patient to the next, the young man experienced an inner delight surprise. The still relatively young ex-fisherman from Capernaum was the living example of fraternal selflessness. As soon as he had recovered, Jeziel had transferred to a more peaceful environment. They started talking, and in that conversation, Peter mentions that when the high fever was being experienced by Jeziel, he was mentioning passages of the scriptures, Isaiah's especially, which is about the coming of the Messiah. And he says, yes, I'm looking forward to the Messiah. But Simon Peter, happily, with lively satisfaction, said, but don't you know that the Messiah has already come? And anxiously, Jeziel said, what do you mean? Haven't you heard of Jesus of Nazareth? No, I haven't, said Jeziel. Well, the prophet of Nazareth has brought us the message from God for all time. They kept on talking, and Jeziel drank in every word of Peter's account, thoroughly thrilled, as if he had encountered a new world. 2,000 years passed by, and we sometimes don't feel that, do we? That a new life is opening before our eyes. We need to open our eyes and see that the Messiah had come. And Peter said a year ago, he was crucified right here in Jerusalem between two thieves. Jeziel's eyes were in tears. Those revelations touched his heart as if he had actually known the prophet of Nazareth. And he knew it. He knew him. And then they keep talking and talking. Well, Jeziel decides to give his life to the Messiah at the house of the way. He asks for permission to stay, to learn everything about the Messiah. And Peter says, the Master used to help all who suffered, and he commanded us, and this is vital for us. I'll put a heart note here. He recommended that we do the same. Question: do we focus on the suffering of the people? Because if we truly feel Jesus' message, we should. I remember more than 12 years ago, Mentor Joseph saying, Vanessa, if you want to be on track in your life, focus on the suffering of people. Because when you stop, look at the suffering and focus on your suffering, you're lost. Jesus recommended exactly that. So if you and I want to learn something to practice in this chapter 3, let's shift the gears in our lives. Stop the whining. We should stop. I'm not saying to you, I'm saying to all of us. Let's stop the whining, the crying, the complaining. Let us focus on those who are suffering and reach out. But we need to have eyes to see. Many people, they look like they are not suffering. And they even mask it up. But we need to have eyes to see. There's no person on earth who doesn't suffer. I've never encountered anyone who doesn't. And if people say they're not suffering, they are under the narcotics of life, in the wineries of life. Let's think about this. From now on, Jeziel devotes himself and he decides to change his name to, it says here, Simon Peter says, You shall be my son from now on. And Jeziel said with blazing eyes, Since I must be a new man in Christ, what shall I be called? The apostle thought for a moment and said, So that you do not forget Achaia, where the Lord deigned to seek you out for his divine ministry, Greek lands. I shall baptize you into the new creed with the Greek name Stephen. Stephen, now the new man in Christ, for a month, absorbed in studying the entire exemplification and teachings of the Master. And, believe it or not, soon, soon, learning to be humble, to be a helper. Because usually people enter spiritist centers and they say, I've already studied much, I'm here to work, I'm here to do something. No, we need to humble ourselves and harmonize ourselves with the team. That's what Stephen did. In a short time, Stephen became famous in Jerusalem for his almost miraculous deeds. Considered as one of the Christ chosen, his decisive and sincere work had made a number of adherents for the gospel of love and forgiveness in just a few months. His noble efforts were not limited only to the task of mitigating the hunger of the poor. Illuminated by his pure and ardent faith, Stephen's word shone amid the Galilean apostles in the church's preaching. In a few months, his name was surrounded by an aura of surprising veneration. I'm going to stop here. This is chapter 3. It's the journey from torture to illumination. Jeziel, faithful to God, putting God above everything else, encountered his freedom to a new life. A life that now is multiplying in seeds of healing towards many who encounter him. We're going to wrap up the program today asking ourselves, if I reincarnated for profound transformations, what do I need to do? What do I need to do to achieve those profound transformations? Do I need to get to know more of myself? And once I know of myself, do I have the courage to change? Or am I attached to that mask of games of mask, to that persona, the millennial persona? Or can we be light and anew, helping others? Yes, we're all personally called, Emmanuel says, to work and be with the Christ. Work with and be with the Christ. Let's meditate on this. Should you have any question, feel free to write it here. We'll be happy to listen from you. We wish you many blessings in this inner journey with Paul and Stephen. Next week we'll be entering chapter 4. If you have any question, comments, feel free to write it down or write an email to kardecradio.com. Thank you, friends.